Now then, the next story that we're moving on to is this internal report from the BBC, which is accusing it of pushing Hamas bias around, Hamas lies, around the world. Now, it was sent last month to the Director General, Tim Davie, and Chairman Samir Shah. And of course, there are now demands for Tim Davie to resign. I'm joined now by Danny Cohen. He's the former director of BBC Television, and he's now a columnist at the Daily Telegraph. Morning, Danny. How are you?
Good morning. Good, thank you. How are you, Jane?
I'm good, thank you very much. Well, here we go. Another day, another story about BBC bias. I'm just going to play devil's advocate here a bit. I mean, you've been at the very top of this national institution. It is vast, isn't it? So how does it work that the ethos of balance permeates down? Because, of course, Tim Davie cannot be sitting there looking at every sort of junior reporter's actions.
You're absolutely right, Jane. It's a vast organisation putting out vast amounts of material every day. I think why this is ultimately responsible of the most senior executives, Tim Davie, CEO of BBC News, Deborah Turnes, is that these are systemic problems. If it was just one incident, so for example, this very clearly misedited clip of Donald Trump, if it was one incident, then it's individual responsibility or the responsibility of one team. But I think what the report from Michael Prescott shows is that there was a systemic bias within the BBC, and it went across a number of issues: the American election and Donald Trump, Israel and the Hamas war. There's more today that's been released on immigration, and I believe there's also things in the report around the issue of trans representation. So these are systemic issues. And the other part of it, which is really important to remember, is these aren't the first time these have been raised with the BBC. People like myself have been raising them with the BBC for over 2 years. And what Michael Prescott report shows is that the BBC has basically been ignoring those complaints, even though it had knowledge from within the organisation that there were serious issues.
So what do you think should have been done the second this report dropped?
Well, I think at another time when editorial standards were held in higher regard at the BBC, people would have lost their jobs, there would have been a lot of soul searching, and there would have been significant questions about reform of the newsroom to try and ensure greater standards of impartiality. I think the problem we've got now is the questions the BBC executives seem to ask themselves is my job safe, and can we get away with this? And if the answers on both of those are yes, they will disregard very clear evidence of bias because they feel they can get away with it. The other thing I'd say, Jane, is that people like me have been criticising the BBC for these things from the outside for a number of years now. Mr. Prescott was inside the BBC. This is what makes this one so different. Mr. Prescott was an independent advisor to the BBC for 3 years and had access to the reports, the internal reports, which were showing evidence of bias, and had access and could witness the lack of management action to really address them. And what's clear is he's written this report and sent it to the board of the BBC because he'd run out of patience and was in dismay that the executives wouldn't deal with these problems properly. So I think this is very, very serious for the BBC, but there's a real question of whether they will hold themselves to account or whether they'll continue to ignore very dangerous signals for the future of the organisation, because if trust in the BBC erodes, the BBC is in real trouble.
Do you not feel that trust has already eroded to a certain extent?
Yes.
Do you not feel a lot of people listening to this will say, I haven't trusted the BBC for a long time?
Yes, Jane, I think that's right. I mean, a lot of people would have lost faith around Brexit. You know, a lot of people would have felt that the reporting around Brexit wasn't balanced. For someone like me from the Jewish community, you know, we've been shocked by the representation of this conflict. It's a terrible conflict. War is terrible, and innocent people have suffered on both sides. But we've been deeply disturbed by by the way this has been reported by the BBC. And Mr. Prescott's report details a number of examples on both BBC Arabic, Newsnight, other places where he could see clear evidence of bias in the way the BBC was representing what was going on.
So you've been very high up at the BBC yourself. If you were Director General now and you received this report, what would you do? What is it that needs to happen here?
I would replace the head of news. You know, I think it's unsustainable. And I think he should consider his own position. We saw over the summer. For me, it's about three scandals too many with Mr. Davey. We had another one over just a few weeks ago, really, over the summer, where a rapper chanted death threats from the stage at Glastonbury, and other very, very troubling comments related to the Jewish community. And Mr. Davey was there at the time. Nothing happened. The material stayed online for hours afterwards. So I think in his case, it's three scandals too many. The three scandals too many. It's really is time for change.
So you agree with, I think Kemi Badenoch has said heads should roll at the BBC. You agree with that?
Yeah, I think it needs a shock to the system. I think they're very complacent, and I think they need a moment where they really take very seriously that these kinds of failures are not acceptable and continue to erode trust in the BBC.
Okay, Danny, thank you very much for your time.